Diving through the vast ocean that is the internet, I have discovered a story so gruesome that gives me chills. The Byford dolphin accident is one of the most terrible accidents in recent history. The 4 divers who were inside the decompression chamber that day could not even realize what had happened, as they did die in a fraction of a second. This is the most brutal, painless death in history. We are in Norway, in the early 1960s. At that time, its economy was very poor. It was based mainly on fishing, the export of wood, and hydroelectric power. But everything began to change in 1963, when the Norwegian government claimed the sovereign rights of the North Sea against England. Thinking that the North Sea was more of a burden than a strategic advantage, and in accordance with various treaties signed after the Second World War, the English ceded that sea to the Norwegian government. Few years later, in 1969, a ship called Ocean Viking found oil within the Norwegian controlled area. But they did not find some oil. Instead, they ran into one of the largest oil pockets in the world. Before long, the Norwegians were extracting 1,600,000 barrels of crude a day. Thanks to that, their economy grew to the levels we see today. One of the most important natural gas pockets of Norway was in a field called Frigg. To extract this gas, the government hired British Petroleum. This multinational in turn contracted a company called Dolphin Drilling. Dolphin Drilling engineers were faced with a daunting challenge, since from the surface to the seafloor there's a depth of 100 meters, and the gas pocket is located about 1,850 meters below the water level. So they devised a plan according to which they would use a semi-submergible, stabilized column drilling rig. They called it Byford Dolphin. This work of engineering had a length of 108 meters long, 67 meters wide, and a depth of 36 meters. It was capable of drilling to a depth of 6,100 meters and could operate in a water depth of 460 meters. It was equipped with advanced drilling equipment and could maneuver with its own engines. An amazing machine. You can already imagine that to operate this monster you need a lot of personnel. And it's true, 102 people work on the platform. Each of the team members had a very specific role, but among the mechanics and engineers we also could find 6 divers. This small team of divers was dedicated to the maintenance and repair of the submerged part of the platform, as well as the drills and extractors when they were in operation. But this job is much more complex than anyone can imagine. Apart from being excellent welders and mechanics, these divers worked in a very particular condition due to the depth at which they operate. Since a diver who usually works 100 meters deep has a little problem. The problem is this: when you go 100 meters below the water level, you cannot breathe from normal air tanks. The pressure you are subjected to makes normal air unfeasible and unbreathable. So in order to carry out this type of operation, you have to breathe a mixture of gases called trimix. Trimix is made up of oxygen, helium and nitrogen. The fact that you are inhaling nitrogen is a problem for your body if you start ascending quickly. This is one of the most important things for divers around the world. When you breathe trimix, the nitrogen it contains is diluted into your blood. As you rise to the surface, this nitrogen expands and generates small bubbles inside your body. This phenomenon is called rapid decompression syndrome, and it can lead to many problems. Poor decompression can lead to joint pain, paralysis and many other diseases that can be fatal and cause your death. So every time a diver goes down to repair something, it can take up to 24 hours between stops to decompress, which, as you can imagine, is unfeasible if you work day after day at that depth. With this procedure, you would spend more time waiting in the water than working. Luckily, the US Navy discovered a way to avoid having to decompress every time a diver surfaces. The technique they developed is called saturation diving. In the 60s, they discovered that the nitrogen that accumulates in the blood has a cap. When you're fully saturated, you do not die. Your body simply does not accept more nitrogen, in which you can be as long as you want at high pressures. It is not pleasant, since your body is at constant state of cold, but it is possible. Finding out that a diver can be under high pressure for as long as he wants, they just had to solve a small problem. How do we do it so that our saturated divers can eat, sleep and cover the rest of their biological needs? So the US Navy also decided to solve that problem and build a series of pressurized containers. Inside these containers, the pressure can be adjusted to the pressure at which the divers work in the water. Divers sleep and eat in these capsules without having to depressurize and can live there for periods of 6, 8 and more months. That is why this job is one of the highest paid in the world, with a diver earning $1,400 a day. But if these pressurized capsules are on the Byford Dolphin, how do they go up and down to the depth of the seabed? For that, they use smaller capsules called bells. These bells are attached to the chambers where the divers live. First pressurized, divers open the hatches and enter the container. They close the door and lower the hood at the exact pressure to the exact depth to avoid decompensation. In 1983, the group of divers operating in the Byford Dolphin consisted of 6 people. 4 of them were saturation divers: Edwin Arthur Coward, Roy Lucas, Bjorn Bergersen and Truls Hellevik. And these in turn were assisted by William Cramon and Martin Saunders, who were also expert divers. The accident took place on November 5. It is not yet known exactly what happened, but the consequences were terrible for the entire team. Bergersen and Hellevik were coming back from doing a maintenance on the seabed, and when they finished, they went up with a pressurized bell to the surface. Cramon and Saunders attached the bell to the decompression chamber and compensated the pressure of the intermediate access, thus allowing the 2 divers to go to the first room. In the second room, Coward and Lucas were resting. The problem came when, following the established security steps, something went wrong. The steps were as follows: 1. Close the hood airlock. 2. Gradually increase the pressure on the hood to seal the door. 3. Close the door of the first chamber that is open for access. 4. Gradually depressurize the access to 1 atmosphere. 5. Open the airlock to separate the hood from the pressurized chamber. But something happened when they got to step 3. The most plausible theory is that due to extreme exhaustion of the divers and a communication failure due to environmental noise, Hellevik failed to close the access lock between the bell and the chamber. Cramon and Saunders thought it was already closed and unhooked the hood, causing the terrible accident. The difference between the pressures inside and the pressures outside was staggering, which triggered an explosive decompression. Inside the chamber, they were at 9 atmospheres of pressure, and outside they were at 1 atmosphere. In addition, all the divers inside had their blood saturated with nitrogen. It all happened in a split second. The bell went off with such force that it killed Cramon instantly and left Saunders seriously injured, but the worst was for the 4 divers inside. The 3 divers who were away from the lock died instantly due to the expansion of nitrogen in their body. Their blood boiled on its own in an instant. Forensics found the remains of the divers after the arteries burst and the blood running through them turned to fat. These fat balls were found throughout their arteries, veins, liver and heart, but they also discovered that it had been expelled with such violence out of the veins that it was scattered throughout the chamber, along with what had recently been the bodies of the divers, now transformed into an unrecognizable mass. In a split second, they were dead, but the worst death was Hellevik's. Finding himself close to the door to close it, the air that came out with overwhelming force caused his body to be sucked into the airlock. His body was ejected through the 2-foot-long crescent moon-shaped opening. With the difference in pressure to which he was subjected, the force applied to the diver's body was approximately 25 tons from the air trying to get out, what ended with the expulsion of all the organs of his thoracic cavity projected to the outside. Inside the chamber, they found his windpipe, section of his small intestine, and his spinal column. Even hours later, they discovered a section of his intestine hanging 10 meters above the lock. The forensics described the state of some organs. They were intact, they said, as if they had been dissected cleanly and expelled out of the body. The accident was so brutal that investigators found little blood at the crash site. The only consolation, if we can put it this way, is that the divers who died there, according to forensics, died an instant and painless death. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, you helped me a lot. Here are some other chilling stories in case you want to take a look at them. See you in the next video.